I guess also by the same token, forcing the city government to once again cover the full increased cost of the Medicaid program, which you indicated would cost $1 billion a year by 2021, approximately. Given the fact that the Medicaid managed care system now underpays our hospitals, both HHC and the voluntaries, by very substantial amounts, does not cover their cost of care, I think it would be very dangerous to force the city to find another $1 billion worth of savings in the Medicaid program just inside the city of New York itself.
I think there's two areas here that collide in effect. The proposed cuts, which again we look forward to being handled in a way that does not affect the city directly, and the challenge we're having with health and hospitals, which is absolutely, as you say, is related to a series of policy changes. Some that are part of the Affordable Care Act, which is, I think, a fundamental step forward for this country was the Affordable Care Act. But there were some elements of it that had, I think, unintended consequences for our public health systems. Some of the Medicaid reform that the state achieved, again, in many ways a very good policy, had some real unintended consequences for our public health system. We're seeing a number of factors collide. They're making the economics of public health systems, not only here, but all over the state, all over the country, less and less viable. So we're going to have to come up with some different solutions because a huge number of our citizens rely on those public hospitals.
Thank you. I just also wanted to mention that I share your view that the state should restore the AIM funding to the City of New York, once known as revenue sharing. And just as an aside, New York City's revenue sharing from the state in 1990 was $500 million, and it was Governor Spitzer who actually started trying to cut revenue sharing. We had restored about half of it when the recession hit, and that's how the remainder got wiped out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Next, it would be Senator Kathy Marchione.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mayor, for being here.
Thank you, Senator.
I serve as the chairman for local government for the Senate. And I hear it all the time, how we're one state. We need to be one state. I watch the remainder of the state outside of New York City struggling, coming in and appearing before local government about how difficult it is to live within the 2% tax cap, which isn't even 2%. This year it's much less. But I listen to you tell me that we are one state, but I see your spending at 6%. I have difficulties stating at one point that we're one state, and then in the next mouthful saying, it's okay because I have needs. Every single municipality that has come before us has a unique set of circumstances that requires them to do the best they can for the residents. But they're doing their best to live under the 2% tax cap. I wonder, and I'm asking your opinion, if the executive didn't actually require you to pay a portion of your Medicaid, even though I know you're saving like $145 million because it's only 2% this year, because you're not adhering to a 2% tax cap that we self-impose and that we have imposed upon every other municipality and government in New York State, except for New York City.
Well, again, Senator, I appreciate the point, and I think everyone's struggling in different ways.
They are.
And I would never for a moment belittle the challenges being faced by municipalities all over the state. We have an unusual reality because we have an income tax, so that means for the average taxpayer, they are paying both a city property tax and a city income tax. And probably it would be healthy for all of us to look at the overall impact that means and to compare across localities. But I think the bigger point here is we have a host of challenges that I think are particularly large and complicated in our city. Again, that aging infrastructure, I know it's a problem all over the state. Ours is just extraordinary in its size. For example, bridges over 100 years old in the city of New York, I believe it's 160 such bridges. So we just have the sheer weight of so many years of expenses that were deferred. I mentioned our public housing authority, home for 400,000 people. That public housing authority alone has a $17 billion unmet capital need level. So I'm not trying to, if you will, compare scars. Everyone's got problems and challenges. What I would say is that our taxpayers, and it's a long-standing tradition, pay two types of taxes. Our challenges are particular and in many ways growing. Some of the new obligations we're being hit with are different than what's happening in some other places. We're also trying to be honest about the fact that, and we say this almost in a spirit of collegiality, we know when trouble hits, and it will, we can't come up here and pretend to say to you, as the state is dealing with its own problems and other municipalities are dealing with theirs, we're not going to be able to say to you, bail us out. We're going to have to do that to the maximum extent possible ourselves. So that's why we, considering ourselves in a sense to have to meet our own obligations in times of trouble, that's one reason why a cap would be counterproductive. But I think the point that Dean Fullahan made earlier, and I say this in a positive vein, because we're all interconnected. If we're paying upwards of 60% of the revenue goes into state coffers, I don't begrudge that. I think that's something that's my obligation to keep doing, in the sense of having a strong economy that creates jobs, that grows, that creates more revenue for all. I'm trying to do the things that will allow that to happen, and what I hear from business leaders all the time. Number one concern, public safety, where we're continuing to invest. Second concern, education. Third concern, affordable housing. We get those pieces right, we will continue to build the New York City economy for the good of the whole state. As I said, we're on our way, I think, quite soon in the scheme of things to a 9 million person population, which is also going to create a whole series of strains. But with many benefits for the entire metropolitan area and the entire state. That's my argument about why I think we should avoid a strategy that actually could limit that growth and undermine our ability to handle the downturns when they do come.
Thank you, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I do agree that New York City is critically important to all of us in New York State. And I understand that you have a different set of circumstances. I myself come from a district last week, that a water line broke. It was a main line. It was 110 years old. The size and the magnitude of what you have is different, but the problems are pretty much the same.
Exactly. I agree with that.
And they're living under a 2% tax cap. So I understand what you're saying, but the rest of us are doing our very best to make sure we can save billions of dollars for people who live here in New York State. And I believe that New York City, although larger, although have your unique set of circumstances, if we're one state, then we're one state, and we should be under the same guidelines to save our taxpayers' dollars. My next question came from something you said about rent control, that we need to have more rent control. A one-bedroom apartment is $3,100, and the state is providing $1,500. When you increase your budget by 6%, aren't those taxes that additional monies being passed on to your taxpayers, so that although we want more rent control paid for by the state, when you're adding to your tax burden, then you're adding to the amount that those owners of those properties have to charge to pay the additional tax. Am I missing something here?
Well, I would just say I think there's a couple additional pieces to the puzzle. First of all, a lot of that growth over the last few years is a result of Hurricane Sandy, and that's very specific. Remember, our representatives in Washington fought very hard for the kind of relief that New York City, New York State, New Jersey deserved as a result of Sandy, the kind of relief that other areas of the country had gotten when they experienced such disasters. There's no question Sandy was the biggest natural disaster in the history of New York City. Massive amount of damage caused. So when those resources came in from FEMA, came in from HUD, they went into our city budget. They positively inflated our city budget. They will be spent on resiliency efforts and recovery efforts. And then that will be gone from the budget. So again, that budget will contract when this immediate cycle of federal funding is over. The other fact, again, major new obligations, which for us are very striking. The fact that we had a 1-2 punch of the actuary change and the specific needs of our Health and Hospitals Corporation that meant $1 billion additional charge in this fiscal year alone. These are situations I think are specific challenges. Again, I agree with you 100%. Every place has a challenge. Each one is different. These are some of ours, both the negative of the $1 billion that we were suddenly hit with, the positive of the federal aid, but knowing that that federal aid will then be used and no longer appear in the budget. So that, I think, modifies a little bit some of the points that you're making. But look, overall, we're simply trying to put the pieces together in a way that is sustainable for this city and for the good of our city economy. I think we both agree, if we failed to take the right steps and New York City started to falter, everyone would be hurt by that. And that's what happened in the 60s and 70s. Let's face it, we saw it with our own eyes. Government made the wrong choices. Government was not fiscally disciplined, did not put reserves in place. When the bad times came, there was nothing to fall back on, and didn't make the kind of investments that kept the city economically viable. We're trying to learn, unfortunately, the lessons of the past and make the adjustments that will allow us to be strong for the good of all going forward. So that's our core strategy, and it is a different approach. Every place has to tailor the approach to their own needs. This is the one that we think is working, and I hope we can all agree that some of these numbers are really encouraging for all of us. We've got 213,000 new jobs in New York City. That's a blessing for this whole state, and it's our job to keep that going.
Thank you, Mayor, and I think I just want to end on this point to say that you're not on your own. As you've been saying, you're on your own. Not one of us sitting up here are on our own. When you have problems with Hurricane Sandy, the state came in, the federal government came in. When I had problems with my water line, I went to the governor's office to ask for some assistance. We're not on our own. We're one state, and when we're in need, as I believe you got a lot of money in the budget this year going into transportation to fix major important things in the state budget, we're not on our own.
Senator, if I may, I appreciate and I agree with you, there are certainly areas where there's been extraordinary commonality. This recent storm is a great example. Tremendously good coordination between the city and the state, the MTA, et cetera, and everyone working in common cause. I would differentiate in an economic downturn. I really would. I say this with absolute respect for your point. I think Sandy and other natural disasters are one type of category, and you'll remember that the federal government was rather slow to respond in terms of the financial support, and it took a real fight in Washington to get there, different than it would have been 10 or 20 years ago. So I think there was a lot of concern about whether the standards were changing in terms of federal obligation and disaster. But what I was referring to is in an economic downturn, where the revenues of the state will be deeply affected, the revenues of the federal government will be affected. When I say we're on its own, it's an acknowledgement of the fact that everyone will be hurting, and we won't be in a position to ask for additional help, even if we're hurting, even if we're cutting vital services. We know we can't turn to people who already have had their own revenue cut to ask for help. That's where we believe the prudent thing to do is to save for that rainy day. That's the way we look at it.
And those in upstate New York, we are in a downturn economically. We're not as vibrant as you are in New York City. And even though they are in an economic downturn, they're still staying within the 2% tax cap or doing the very, very best that they can. My last question. I've listened to you talk about police protection, and I guess I'm looking for an update on where police relations stand in the city. Specifically, do the courageous men and women of law enforcement have the support financially, materially, personally they need to continue doing the important jobs that they do?
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. First of all, I'm very proud to say I gave them the finest police leader in the United States of America in Bill Bratton. He and his leadership team have done an extraordinary job. 2 years running now, we have driven down major crime across the 7 major crime categories. We have a 5.8% decrease in crime over 2 years. We are adding resources for the latest police vests for every one of our officers to protect them. We're adding resources for technology like shot detection systems. That's in our current city budget, so that our officers have immediate alerts when a shot is fired in key areas of the city, and it also helps them tremendously in the investigation efforts. We're adding resources so that every single one of our officers has the most up-to-date technology, so they can get, for example, a suspect description and even a photo or a sketch of a suspect in their hand on an iPhone instantly. Something that wasn't true just a year ago now is becoming common for every single officer. That's going to greatly intensify their ability to protect both communities and themselves when they have that kind of information. The most training our officers have ever received, including tactical training that helps to keep them safe, every single member of our force being trained. A 500 plus person critical response command. I'm very proud of this change we made in June. It is an anti-terror unit, a standalone, dedicated anti-terror unit, well-armed, well-trained, that we can use, obviously, given that we are sadly, one of the #1 global terror targets. This unit used to be drawn off, the similar unit was drawn off of individual police precincts on a temporary basis. We're now going to have 500 plus officers who do only anti-terror operations. We think that's going to help them be ever more effective at preventing terror in the city. An overall increase of 2,000 officers in patrol strength, again, the first increase since 2001 to help us sustain our safety. And obviously, I think police officers will be the first to say one of the best ways to keep them safe is to add to the ranks and give them the backup they deserve, and we're doing that.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Malliotakis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to your staff for keeping me informed during the snowstorm. We appreciate the open communication. I just wanted to talk also about this property tax cap. Last year, we supported rent control legislation for the City of New York, as well as we saw the Rent Control Board, of which you appoint all 9 members, implement a rent freeze. But we really don't see the same type of empathy for the property taxpayers in the City of New York, or aside from property taxes, we could even say like a water bill freeze, which puts many landlords in a jam here if you're going to freeze the rents. But my homeowners, I think, are in a situation now where if this budget goes through as is, we're going to see them be doubly hit. One, because their property taxes will not be capped, and 2, then they also have to take on the burden of the $650 million over the next 3 years for Medicaid. So I'm very disappointed that you don't support the cap. I'll continue to advocate that with my colleagues, but I hope you really reconsider, because I think that the property taxpayers in the City of New York deserve the same type of relief that you've put forth for the rent payers in the city.
Well, Assemblymember, may I speak to that?
Sure.
First of all, I want to emphasize, with the Rent Guidelines Board, the charge that I've given them is to look at the real expenses each year and to adjust the increases in rent according to the real expenses that landlords have. You will remember that the first year was one number, second year was a different number. Every year you're going to see a different number according to the facts. Now, one thing that did change in the last couple of years, it's well known, is the price of fuel went way down. In the past, honestly, when such a change occurred in favor of the landlord's bottom line, it was not necessarily reflected in the rent increase of tenants. In fact, the rent increase of tenants stayed fairly substantial regardless of whether the cost of landlords went up or down. We have a different view. We believe it should be a very clear process to identify what those costs are. When costs of landlords go down, tenants should have that savings reflected in their rent situation. When it goes up, we should also pass that along.
But the water bills and the property taxes have
Again?
The water bills and the property taxes have continued to rise. But more specifically, instead of the landlords, I want to focus on my constituents who are the homeowners and residential homeowners on Staten Island and Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. I also just, maybe you can answer this question because no one seems to be able to give me a straight answer of why those individuals who paid their property taxes in full last year were hit with a notice in September saying that they owed more money.
Could you be specific about that?
Okay, so for instance, I'm a property tax owner, and I paid my taxes in full, and then in September I received a notice saying, oh, by the way, you owe another $100 or $200, and I think it was a percentage, a point, I'm not sure the exact percentage that increased, but I found that to be very odd, that someone who had paid their property taxes in full received another bill later on saying that they owed more money, and then I found out that many other constituents in my community were hit with the same type of notice.
I'll get a clarification to you. Again, as I said, we're adamant about not increasing the rate. We know a number of people's assessment has gone up, and that's affected them. But I'll get back to you on the specific point you're raising. I just want to make one other point on your previous point on the water bills. One of the things I talked about when I was public advocate was ending the practice of the city using water bills as a general revenue source. We've incrementally moved on that, and we're going to be at a point soon when we end that practice entirely. And from that point on, the water bill will only reflect the costs of maintaining the water system. Now, I do want to emphasize, Lord knows nothing more important than water to human life, and our system is extraordinary, and it's one of the great virtues of New York City is having such a great water system. It is costly to maintain. But what I feel adamantly, and I'm a homeowner too, is that we should only pay through a water bill for water and nothing else. So we're making those adjustments rapidly. Second, we've added in protections for senior citizens, low-income homeowners to try to lessen the impact of water bill increases on them, and those are available to constituents. So I want you to be aware of that.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I remember when you were the public advocate and you called for water bills to be frozen, and now that you're mayor, it seems that there's been a change of heart. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to working with you on that front. Regarding the $337 million for the HHC, I want to also add my voice to that of Assemblyman Cusick, who said that we would really like Staten Island to be considered. You mentioned in your remarks, you used the term fair and proportional. Staten Island would like to be considered fair, receive their funds fair and proportionally as well when it comes to the HHC, because there are 11 public hospitals throughout the city of New York, and none of them are in the borough of Staten Island. And so, not that we are advocating for a public hospital, but we would like to have our proportional funds supporting those two hospitals that we do have and are certainly at capacity. So we appreciate if you would consider that.
Yes.
Also, with regard to the city adding $868 million, or putting forth an $868 million capital plan for to add 11,800 seats in schools throughout the city. I can't stress to you enough how the schools in my district, as I'm sure many others here, are at capacity, whether it's 100% over capacity, 150% over capacity. One school in particular, PS 13 in my district in Rosebank, which I share with Senator Savino, they've been advocating for a K-8 with the new development of Mount Manresa and your affordable housing plan to add 200,000 affordable housing units. We really need to address this issue of overcapacity, and we hope you'll be looking at those schools in my district. And I'd like to talk to you further at another time about the particular issues that we have in Staten Island and Bay Ridge.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. And I would say, as you indicate in the capital budget, we have announced an additional 11,800 seats, bringing us to a grand total of 44,000, I believe it is, for this capital plan. There'll be more in the next capital plan, which is after fiscal 20. We have a profound problem with overcrowding. This number we've reached by adding the 11,800 is the number we believe not only that we can afford, but that is physically reachable within the time frame of the next 3 years of the capital plan. So our charge as School Construction Authority was to tell us what was the maximum you could actually build practically in that time frame. And this is what they come back with. No surprise to you that as this city continues growing, finding the space and putting together the lots for a new school and constructing the new school is more difficult all the time. We're committed to these numbers and the ones after, but this is what we think is the outer limit for the next few years. Okay, with some of the parochial schools closing, I think we may have opportunities on Staten Island to expand. So I would like to speak with you at a later time. Absolutely. We have a running dialogue with the Archdiocese and also with the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens that we have an interest in any and all properties that come online, whether for schools or other uses. Great. With regards to the 41,000 units that you've achieved in affordable housing and the 200,000 that you have planned for, how much of that is senior housing? We have a terrible crisis in my community of a tremendous amount of seniors without housing that's affordable for them. Can you give me any specifics? The overall plan calls for a minimum of 10,000 units of senior housing. Now, obviously, some of the housing that is being created that will not be phrased as senior housing will still go to seniors, but the minimum that we're allotting specifically to reach seniors is 10,000, and we're looking for ways to add upon that.
10,000 out of the 200,000?
Correct.
That seems like a very low number, but also what about out of the 41,000 that has already been achieved?
Again?
The 41,000 that has already been achieved?
Right.
Is that included in the 200,000, or is that
Yes,
separate?
the 41,000 out of the 200,000.
Okay, well, I hope, if we could look more at the senior population here, especially, I happen to represent one of the largest populations of senior citizens in my district, and so I think that this is something that has come to me time and again out in the community. I have one last question regarding Hurricane Sandy and the Build It Back program. Are we still on schedule to complete the Build It Back construction by the end of this year?
Yes, I asked this question of Amy Peterson, who's the director of that program. I think has done an outstanding job. I ask her every few weeks. We are adamant. For the single-family homes, we know some of the multifamilies, it's a little more complicated. For the single-family homes, by December 31st this year.
Okay. I've also been speaking with Amy Peterson, and I agree that she has been very responsive to my office and has taken our recommendations into consideration and has helped us accomplish some of these goals. With regards to the abandoned properties on Staten Island, myself and Senator Lanza and our councilman, Steve Matteo, we have written to you and Amy Peterson regarding having the city purchase for acquisition for redevelopment those homes that have been abandoned during Hurricane Sandy. I understand that there's a favorable outcome. I just wanted to, if you could share the details.
For this question, I appreciate very much the question, and appreciate that you and your colleagues have really pushed us to look at this as another good option. I would like to call in a relief pitcher for this question and turn to Sharif Solomon.
We are interested in finding a way to use this HUD funding, and we hope to start developing the pilot this February, and so we'll be in touch with you and your colleagues on that for submission.
Okay, excellent. Last question, because I ran out of time, is do you anticipate, because we've received some constituents in my office that would like to...
I'm sorry, say again?
We received some constituents over the last few years that have missed the Build It Back deadline, would like to be in the program. Do you anticipate opening up the program again for applicants should you have money left over?
I do not anticipate that. We don't see a scenario at this moment where there will be money left over, but most importantly, we've set this deadline after a very extensive process. To many opportunities were given people to participate. A lot of people chose not to. Some people who thought they were eligible were not. But we feel fundamentally the door was open for a long time. It's time to put Sandy behind us, get this job done, and move on.
Okay, and please let my office know how we can be helpful in achieving this goal, making sure we do finish, indeed, the construction by the end of the year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker would be Senator Ruben Diaz.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Afternoon, whatever it is.
Mr. Mayor, yesterday I wrote in my column that what you should know, and I give you praise.
I saw that, Senator. I was very appreciative.
You know that's very
We
rare.
monitor your statements closely, Senator.
Yeah, but today we're going to change.
Well,
Today we're changing.
Senator, it was fun while it
Today I go
lasted.
back to normal.
It was fun while it lasted.
Okay. I want to talk about the homeless situation in the city of New York. We have about 40,000 families in shelters. There are community-based organizations sponsoring this program, some of them. And they are landlords. So Mr. Scott Stringer, the controller of the city of New York, has decided that to stop payment and not to sign the contracts. That have forced some organization to borrow money, community-based organization to borrow money from the banks to pay interest that the city will not pay them, will not reimburse them. And also, families that need services are paying the price and I've been discriminated. I think that what Controller Stringer is doing is very damaging to the families and to the community-based organizations. Because if a landlord has some kind of violation, then hold the landlord's money, but let the community organization continue providing the good services. My question to you is, why have you not sued Scott Stringer, the New York City Controller, and to compel him to register the contract as the law requires?
Well, Senator, the goal always in government is to see if we can work things out, and we're in the process of, we think, productive conversations with the Comptroller on that issue, and that right now we are not being hindered from doing the work we have to do. We're making sure that providers who are doing their job get the resources they need. Look, at the same time, we have a lot we have to address in terms of the homelessness crisis. We look forward to working, for example, with the State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, and with Comptroller Stringer, auditing the shelters together, making sure the repairs happen that are needed. We're doing a host of reforms in terms of homelessness, our new Homestead outreach effort, obviously the 15,000 units of supportive housing that we've committed to. We're very, very happy the governor's committed to additional units. What we're doing all the time to prevent homelessness in the first instance, which has been more and more successful, and the 22,000 people who were in shelter who we got out of shelter and got to better housing. We're going to deepen all those efforts. When it comes to the question with the city comptroller, we think we're moving productively to resolve that issue and to make sure that the providers who are doing their work the right way do continue to get the resources they need.